Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today I'm going to talk about one of my very favorite subjects, in case you haven't figured it out yet, and that is preserving food and food storage. So what this is going to be about is kind of going over some of the basics. So I want to cover mostly dehydrating versus canning versus freezing, and which one is best. To tell you right off the bat, there isn't one best method all the way around for everything for everyone. It's really going to depend on the individual, the things that you're putting up, the length of time you want them put up, and what you're looking at also for nutrient density. Now for me, I like to use all of the above methods, and what I use is going to depend on which items I'm putting up. I pressure can, I water bath can, I freeze, and I dehydrate. But I also want to talk a little bit about the difference of buying dehydrated foods, pre-dehydrated foods, freeze-dried in particular, as opposed to dehydrating the stuff yourself. That also is going to depend on a few factors. So let's actually start with that one. So I have several things that I like to buy, as a lot of you know, from Mother Earth products. For instance, their pineapple, their mangoes, their garlic, and the onions. Now the pineapple and the mangoes I buy because, well, I can't grow them. And for the price that I pay to go ahead and buy them, rather than to stock up on fresh ones and dehydrate them myself, to me is worth it, because there's so much time and work put into preparing the foods and dehydrating them. And especially if you're not like us and you don't have solar power, because in the summertime is when I do most of my dehydrating, when we have lots of solar power coming in. I have 3 dehydrators I run on the solar power. Not everyone has solar power. So how much money is it costing you in time to dehydrate? And also, freeze-dried foods are going to have a very different flavor than your dehydrated foods. Now, I like both freeze-dried and dehydrated pineapple. Yes, I have bought fresh pineapple and dehydrated it myself, and it was wonderful. However, again, to me, it's worth it just to go ahead and stock up on it freeze-dried and save my time and energy to put into other things. And so that's going to apply to a lot of things. Now, we still have yet to find a good carrot that grows really well for us here. Some people around here can do fine, but I still just haven't found that perfect carrot. And carrots are so cheap to buy at Costco organic, and you can buy those and then can those up, and I plan on doing that real soon. I actually haven't canned carrots yet, but I've canned so many things I'm not concerned about, because I know it's going to be just as easy as canning up my own green beans. But for the cost of buying the organic ones at Costco and then just canning them up, that's just the best all-around deal, and that saves me garden space for the things that I know do well here, like, for instance, the zucchini that I do grow and dehydrate myself. I will never buy somebody else's preserved zucchini, because I have it preserved in several ways, and my favorite way is to dehydrate it like this. I do still freeze some of it though for use in other things. So going back to the carrots, one of the things I do still like to buy, besides getting the ones at Costco, I get the dried ones from Mother Earth products. It's just worth it for me to do that. Again, these kind of things are going to depend on your pocketbook, what you can afford, and if you do your price comparisons to time to energy input, and would your time and energy be better spent doing something else or dehydrating something else. So here's the other thing. During the time of the year that I'm doing most of my dehydrating, I'm dehydrating much of my own goods already. I have got herbs going all the time in my dehydrator, as well as different greens I get from the garden, whether it be nettle or grape leaves or strawberry leaves, dandelion leaves, greens from things like beets and turnips and rutabaga, kale, and all kinds of stuff. And so that's what goes in my mixed greens blend. And these are the kind of things that are going all summer long and part of the spring. During the spring is when I start dehydrating up my tea, especially the peppermint, because peppermint tea is our favorite throughout the year. And so I like to dehydrate a lot of that, so I can have up to 3 dehydrators going at a time. And so that leaves me little space and time for dehydrating up things like carrots, which I can't grow very well anyway, or store-bought fresh pineapple. And so I make my choices according to that. Obviously, this is going to be individual. Now, where you live, you might be able to get much better prices on fresh pineapple and have the time to dehydrate that up because maybe you're not doing all these other things. So it's about balancing it out. So I've already said that. I'll try not to repeat it too many times, but let's go ahead and move on to some other things. So what are the benefits to dehydrating over canning or freezing? So the benefits of dehydrating or even buying pre-dehydrated foods is that they're going to have the longest shelf life, as long as, like this coconut, you vacuum seal them well into your canning jars, and you make sure that the seals are, make sure everything's clean and dry before you do the vacuum sealing, and no dents or chips or anything like that on your lids or on your jars. Your things can last for many, many years in the jars. You do have to realize, though, they're clear. So you want to make sure you protect them from light as much as possible, because that will degrade the things inside. But anyway, I've had coconut. This one I just jarred up, but I had some from 2014. I think I'm working on my last jar from 2014. It's in this cupboard here. And when I opened it up, it tasted as fresh as the day that I put it up in the jar. So a couple other benefits of dehydrating. It's freezing and dehydrating are the two best ways for preserving the nutrients within. And I forget which preserves it better. I've heard both. But I would say they're both fairly equal, and some of it may also depend on the items that you're freezing. So preserving your nutrients is going to be best in both those two methods, more so than it will be in your canning. And then, of course, one of the obvious things is dehydrated and freeze-dried foods are going to take up the least amount of room than anything else, because I can fit a whole bunch of zucchinis in a jar. I'm talking big zucchinis in one jar like this when it's dehydrated up. As opposed to freezing it into jars, I might be able to stick a partial zucchini in a jar this size. And I do have a bunch of zucchini frozen up in jars like this, where I dice them up and put them in jars, because I don't use I've given up on Food Saver, and I'm also trying to get away from plastic as much as I can. And so I'm doing jars now for freezing that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's taking up a lot more room in my freezer having some jars like that. So I don't do as many that way as I do the dehydrated method, because I can use this in quite a few different types of meals, and it takes up so little room. I don't recall how many. I could have as many as 4 big zucchinis in this 1 quart jar. So there's the benefits of dehydrating. So again, space saving, long-term shelf life, and the nutrient properties being, as long as it's dehydrated on not too high of a heat, you want a very low heat, then you're going to be preserving your nutrients a lot more. And so here's the benefits of freezing. You're getting your food, mostly you can keep your food as raw as possible. So I did a video where I talked about some of the many things that you can freeze, and I only covered a few different things. But a lot of people came back and said, oh, I didn't know you could freeze cantaloupe and other types of melon, because we've done honeydew, we've done cantaloupe whenever we've got really good deals on these things. Chop them up. I've done this with pineapple, and boy, do these things taste good. They're still good if you vacuum seal them well or freeze them into jars. And then there's so many different ways you can use them, and you're keeping them raw and preserving their nutrients. Obviously, the downfalls of freezing is going to mean that you're going to be taking up freezer space, which is one of the spaces we tend to have the least of. And if you're concerned about having power outages, you're going to have to make sure you have some kind of backup to keep that stuff frozen. So I know that in my video I did a while back on, it was just a quick run through when we were talking about the big virus scare thing. And I was talking about the importance of putting up food storage. And I just mentioned freezing, and a couple people said, oh, what happens if your freezer goes out? Well, I was only mentioning one of the methods, but obviously, yes, you need to make sure if you're freezing anything, you have some way to back that up. So if you don't have solar power, then it's a good idea to get a gas generator. The very least, make sure that you put your freezer in a place that stays cold, that stays the coldest as possible. So we actually have a freezer out in the shop, and we have a freezer here in the house. When we have power outages, in those places, they're still gonna stay pretty cool. I also throw quilts over the top to insulate the freezer, so that's something else to think of. But if the power outage is extended and our solar power is low and we can't switch it over to solar power because we've had so many dark days in the winter, then we'll run our gas generator for a few hours to basically recharge our freezers. So it's not a concern for us. But if worse comes to worse and we absolutely had to, maybe the freezers all die, well, I can then go ahead and start canning stuff up. And yes, I can do that without power because I do it all on propane, typically outside. But I have done it in the house before because, you know, I don't have propane stove, as you can see, but I do have a propane burner, and I've done it in the house before using safety measures. But usually I like to do that outside because it is on an open propane burner with an open flame. But yes, I can do that. I can can all this stuff if I absolutely have to. So benefits of canning are the ease of use once you go to use the thing. So you open up, let's say, like a jar of chili. Chili is one of those things I love to can. Some other things we really like to can are peaches, because Patrick really likes home canned peaches. I also like to can tomatoes, and I like to can salsa, and then other things like jams and green tomato relish and things like that. And yes, I do have a recipe on the green tomato relish. I will link to in the description box down below if you're interested. I also put zucchini in there, so it's a good way to use up zucchini and your green tomatoes towards the end of the summer. But I don't just can these things up. I also, when it comes to tomatoes, I also like to dry them. I like to dehydrate them because they have uses of their own this way. So some of the things that I may like to can, I may also like to dehydrate because several reasons. The tomato flakes, I use these for thickening up sauce. So let's say I take a jar of tomatoes like this, and it's easy to use. I can just pour it in a pot and add my different herbs and spices, and then I can add the tomato flakes to thicken it up, so I don't need to use tomato paste, which tomato paste, when you make it yourself, takes a very, very long time and a lot of energy. And I don't like to buy, especially anything acidic like tomatoes, in cans from the store. So even if it says organic, I avoid that because of the acidity in the cans. It makes for an unhealthy combination. So I either can them like this, or I dehydrate them, and then using the two in conjunction keeps you from having to use tomato paste to thicken up your sauces for spaghetti, pizza, ravioli, lasagna, that kind of stuff. And then, like I said, for the chili, ease of use. The reason I can up chili is for when we have those days where things have just been so busy. I realized either A, I forgot to pull some meat out of the freezer for a meal I had planned on making, but I forgot to get the meat out, and so it's too late in the day, or it's just too darn busy. We've just had one thing coming in after another after another. Yesterday was one of those days, but thankfully I had made some meatballs and gravy the day before, so we had plenty left over for us to eat on, so I didn't have to worry about that. But on those nights where I don't have leftovers, then I can go to my home canned chili. So this is the benefits of home canned foods, is that, well, first of all, you know what's going in there. Yes, you're going to lose some of your nutrients when you're canning your foods, but they're ready to eat. You're still going to get the calories out of them, and it's still something that can be tasty and wonderful straight out of the jar or simply heated up. Here's another thing here. I canned up some salmon when Patrick came back from his fishing trip, and he came back with a whole bunch of fish, and so I just canned it all up. I have a whole bunch of canned meats that can be used in various different ways, but coming back to the comparisons, I don't like to have only canned meats. Why is that? Because I can't do the same thing with my canned hamburger, because it's already been pre-browned and all that kind of stuff, as I can do with frozen hamburger. So I have frozen venison burger and I have frozen beef burger, and these are things I'm going to use for making things like meatballs and patties and meatloaves. You can't do that with canned ground beef, but you can do that if it's already been frozen and then thawed. So I have both. The canned ground beef can be used in many things, but since it's already been cooked, you just can't use it to make a good meatball. It's not going to work. Or a good breakfast sausage. And I have recipes on these things as well. I'll go ahead and try to remember to link those if you're interested in the description box down below. Now, when it comes to my herbs, everything gets dehydrated. So I have just a sampling of herbs. I have this echinacea that I'm working through right now. I've been using it in tea to help boost our immunities. I've got some dandelion flower. A couple more ideas is the lavender and the catnip. I have sage. I have oregano. I have a whole bunch of stuff back here. A lot of it from my garden, like woolly lamb's ear, marshmallow leaves and flowers, and the list goes on. Pansies, rose petals, so on and so forth. All of this stuff gets dehydrated. I'm not going to can any of that, obviously, and I'm not going to freeze it. Now, some people do like to freeze their herbs. What they'll do is they'll put it in oil, like an olive oil, and then freeze them in ice cube trays. Now, I've never tried that, but that's an excellent idea. Let's say you put some rosemary, basil, and oregano. You did that blend and put it in some oil and some ice cubes. That would be a really great thing to add to your sauces, that your Italian sauces that you're going to make. So that's just an example. Now, I do believe there's also some people that will freeze it up in water, and then that would be something they would add to soups. So those are good options. And the thing that's nice about that is you're going to keep that more fresh flavor of your herbs when you do it that way. But again, I haven't tried it. I may try it with a few this year when my herbs come in fresh, but still mostly I'm going to dehydrate. That's going to take up the least amount of room, and it still adds a lot of great flavor and benefits to the various things I make, whether it be medicinal extracts, tinctures, or just using for flavoring in my various meals that I make. Okay, so now let's get down to taste. Some things you're not going to know whether or not it's best to freeze, dehydrate, or can until you try each one of those things with the various fruits, vegetables, and whatnot. One thing I was doing clear up until this last year with my green beans as they were coming in, just for the ease of not having to worry about it and just getting them taken care of as soon as they were coming in, as I was freezing my green beans. And no, I don't blanch. I think they turn out, green beans and snow peas turn out so much better if you do not blanch them, you just freeze them directly. However, I still think they taste best when they've been home canned. So last year I finally was able to get enough beans at one time that I was able to can a bunch up, and I love them, my favorite way. To me, they taste better than frozen. However, you might want to freeze your green beans if you're going to cook them up in something else anyway, like using in a stir fry. That's definitely what you want to do. I found with snow peas, I found the best way with those is to cut them in half and freeze them directly. Don't leave them whole. Yes, I've done that, but for some reason they seem to turn out better if I cut them in half and then freeze them. I have also dehydrated snow peas with really good success. They dehydrate up beautifully. They have a wonderful flavor and a nice crunch that will make them pretty tasty right out of the jar. I've actually found for flavor, I like the dehydrated snow peas best, but for using in stir fries, I like the frozen ones better. So again, it's going to depend on what you're making and what your tastes are. Now, I've heard people say they can't stand green beans when they're frozen. I like them. I think they're good. I just think they taste better when they've been canned. Yes, I'm losing some of the nutrients by canning them, but I do find that everyone tends to like them better once they've been canned. It just seems to make them taste a lot better. So here's the deal. If we worry too much about the nutrients we're losing, and then we're just putting up food in ways that we or our family is not going to eat because we don't like it as much, then what's the point? You're not getting those nutrients if you're not eating it. So it's important that you put up your food in the way that you just get a broad variety. So if you have stuff that your family will eat frozen, do that. And then you're going to get the nutrients that way. If you have stuff your family will eat dehydrated, do that. But also remember, a lot of your dehydrated stuff you're going to end up cooking anyway. Not all of it, but some of it. And so anytime you heat your foods, you're going to lose some of the nutrients. You will still get some though. It's not like your body's going to starve for nutrients if you're eating a lot of cooked foods. Besides, some foods are best if cooked and shouldn't be eaten raw. There's a lot of cruciferous vegetables such as kale that are actually healthier for you if you cook them a little bit first. Some things are healthier for you raw. So again, it comes back to what it is and what's best for you and what you and your family will eat. So it's not going to make any sense for you to freeze up a bunch of stuff because you think you're going to preserve the nutrients better if no one's going to eat it. And then again, coming back to uses, each one of these methods is going to depend on how it's used. Oh, here's another one. Something else that dehydrates up beautifully and seems to have almost the same amount of uses as it does when it's fresh are jalapenos. I have a bunch of jalapenos I dehydrated up from 2015. And these work great in all the kinds of things that I would like to use jalapenos in. With your dehydrated stuff and your freeze-dried stuff, if I'm using it in soups and things like that, I just throw them in. If it's something I want to stir fry, then I'm going to rehydrate them by soaking them for a little bit first, and then I'm going to stir fry them in. Oh, and then when you're talking about making extracts of any kind, whether it be medicinal extracts and tinctures or extracts for flavor, dehydrating things is going to be better than freezing or canning because you want your things dehydrated for making extracts. So right here I have a jar of dehydrated lemons from 2018, and yes, I find that lemons, for some reason, not so much oranges, but lemons and limes will turn dark in food storage if you dehydrate them, and this is even trying to keep them out of the light. However, they still taste really good. They still have a wonderful flavor. And so this looks really dark, but I have started a batch of homemade lemon extract for flavoring. My two favorite methods are using only my homemade wine or my homemade wine mixed with glycerin. A lot of times it depends on the thing that I'm extracting. So, and yes, I have videos out there on extracts. I have 2 out now. I have one on just the alcohol-free ones, and then I have one where I show how I use the different blends. When it comes to making extracts, you're going to want to make sure, if that's something you're going to want to keep doing, that you have some of your favorite things you like to use for flavoring in a dried or freeze-dried form. I've used freeze-dried foods as well as dehydrated foods for making extracts. Both work really well. Yes, you can use fresh when you're talking herbs. Peppermint extract is made best out of fresh peppermint rather than dehydrated. But most of your extracts are going to do better when you're using dehydrated or freeze-dried foods or herbs. So let me cover again some of the basics that you have to take into consideration when it comes to making your choices of what you're going to can, what you're going to freeze, and what you're going to dehydrate. So your availability to power if you're going to freeze, and how you're going to back that up if you have a power outage. Your space, whether it be in your pantry or in your freezer. So if you have limited space, dehydrating a lot of your foods is going to be best to make the most out of your space. Though I still wouldn't recommend dehydrating everything. You're still going to want to have some canned and some frozen things. How much of the nutrients that you want to preserve. So looking at nutrients, drying and freezing are going to be best in order to hang on to those. And for the sake of convenience, canning is best, because then the food is usually ready to go. Most of the time, all it needs is a little heating up. And then the other thing would be uses. How you're going to use your items is going to depend on the way that you want to preserve them and put them up in your storage. And then the other thing being your time. So figuring in each one of these factors for each of the things you're going to do. Do the math on some of this too if you're wanting to figure out what's going to save you the most money. Either buying pre-freeze-dried or dehydrated foods like I do with Mother Earth products, or buying them local and drying them up yourself. If you're thinking about freeze drying, the cost of a freeze dryer is quite expensive, and then you got to consider the power to run it. So again, this is why buying pre-freeze dried foods is more cost effective to me, because I'm not interested in buying a freeze dryer because of the noise, the space, and the power it pulls, even though we have solar power that we could use if we need to. I would just at this time rather buy freeze dried and stock up on as much as I can. And that way also in a grid down situation, if it's a major big catastrophe, then I have plenty of pineapple, mango, things that we can't grow and that we probably won't be able to get if the trucks can't get through or whatever. And so if I have those put up in food storage, then I have some nice tasty things that we can add in now and then to prevent food fatigue. So again, another one of those things that you should consider. So if you're interested more about food storage and some of the things that we put up, but still every time I do these, I'm only talking about just a small fraction of the things that we put up. But I'm going to refer you back to a video that I did. It will have been out for probably about a month by the time you see this video, and I will link to it down below. And it's called Food Storage Beyond Rice and Beans. And yes, you should be storing up rice, beans, grains, all that kind of stuff. Very, very important. Lots of stuff you can do, especially if you have your own grain mill. Lots of stuff you can do with your whole grinding corn. Even popcorn can be ground into a meal or a flour. So these are the kind of things we do stock up on, but a lot of people already know about that, so you want to look beyond that and think of things that's going to help just provide overall good calories and nutrient dense foods, as well as preventing food fatigue. So check that video out down below. And I get a lot of people that ask me about a pantry tour. Well, for one, we don't store our food all in the same place. Yes, we have a good amount of it in one particular room, and I do have a video where it's a partial tour of that room. If you check out that video, that I'll link down below, you can at least get an idea of how I store. And I also have another video about how I store my canned goods and rotate through them. So I'll also make sure that I put that down below so you can see how that works. Just to give you an idea, because I know a lot of you that ask these questions are asking because, not because you're being nosy, but because you're wanting to see how I make it work. Well, here's the other thing too. It's always a work in progress. Things are always changing in the way that I organize my stuff and rearrange it, especially as I can up more stuff. Here's the new year, I've got this stuff. Oh, I think I want to rearrange this and put this here and put this here. So it's always changing. So even if I showed you now, it would be totally, not everything's exactly where I want it right now, because it seems like there's always some shelf that's in a state of flux. But I'm sure those of you who have been doing food storage and canning and home preserving your foods totally can relate to this. All right, so anyone who has any more suggestions or ideas that you can add to this video, because I know I'm forgetting a whole bunch of stuff that I could be saying, but that's why this is great, because we have a wonderful community of well-seasoned food storage, food preserver people that can put their comments down below and give you some ideas and ask your questions, because even if I don't get a chance to get in there and answer them, there's always somebody that's going to come in there and give you some good answers, or just some even different ideas that I might not have. So don't forget to read the comments down below, because there's so much to be learned from our great community here. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.